All right, guys, Wildcard DFS edition of Bully the Sims. We got both Uticow and Ship My Money joining today. We're going to kind of go game by game, mostly orienting around the 6-game full slate on DraftKings, but we'll, of course, kind of hit on specific team and player dynamics in case you guys are playing Showdown or the 2 or 3-game slate as well. Yuta should be joining us here in a second, but Adam, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to doing it. This is our first 3-man, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, because you've been the pinch hitter, and now we're getting the whole gang together. Have you been? Do you have playoff best ball brain? Have you been drafting those, or are you just DFS right now?
No, I did one on show with Davis yesterday, and that was my first.
Okay.
It's one of those where, like, I've said it before, like, I'm really lazy about stuff where it's like, oh, there's clearly going to be an edge here because if you spend an hour working on, playoff, like, chances of making the playoffs or whatever, like, you have an advantage, but it's like I don't feel like doing that, so I'm just not going to play.
Yes. I wrapped up my drafts. I'm now just going to focus specifically on DFS from here. I'm feeling tired from all of the drafting. We got Yuta here back ready to break down this wildcard slate. How you doing, Yuta?
I'm good. Getting ready and excited for some real games.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of, do you dial back your DFS play and focus more on betting, or is this like a very normal weekend for you?
Well, there's fewer options on the menu. And in DFS, I just take what I can get. So nothing really changed. It's just, wasn't great to have like contextualized motivation for a lot of these games, sort of like how you would do like late season NBA. I kind of prefer when everyone's going all out, and it's also rewards like the skill aspect more.
Yeah. And I feel like the way this season just shook out, it felt like we had 3 week 18s in a row from like 16, 17 on.
Yeah.
I was actually just talking with Adam before the show about a few injury spots. One good news, I just saw Omarion Hampton is back at practice today. That was going to be a pretty big one there if he didn't play. I also asked Adam right before we went on, and Yuta, you're going to play whatever's available, but do you have a preference as far as the 6-game slates or the individual slates?
I like the 6-game by far. I think they did a good job on DraftKings at least getting some size in there, where most people could just play whatever they feel like dabbling in. But me, I'm probably going to like overlap the 6-game with like both the Saturday and the Sunday.
Yep. Yeah. And what about you, Adam?
Yeah, probably the same. Like you said, I am glad that there's actual good contests to play on all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the full slates have been underserved in years past. So nice to see that juiced up this year. I think what we'll do is kind of just go game by game. We can kind of hit on different elements, obviously the inputs, favorite angles, maybe where we think chalk could land. I say if we talk about ownership, let's do it through the lens of the 6-game slate, probably. But other than that, dealer's choice with what you guys want to talk about. But yeah, let's start here with Panthers hosting the Rams, a rematch actually from a late season game where the Panthers won. They are now 10.5-point dogs here. The Rams are back to full health, getting Devontae Adams. They also got Tyler Higbee back last week. What are you seeing here in this game, Yuta?
I noted that the opener of 10 seemed pretty high to me, but it only went further the other way. So that kind of goes against what I would think, given that it's like a playoff game. I would have guessed it would have opened like even like 9.5 or something like that. So I don't think I have the best read on it. And we haven't seen LA really with their full squad as far as Devontae Adams in a little bit. The tight end has also been probably more of a rotation than Stafford would like. The way I lean it for is actually that LA should be able to dictate sort of the pace of this game. So I kind of like their offense to succeed and maybe even make it like a one-sided type onslaught shootout situation.
What do you think, Adam? I assume Puka's going to end up being the highest owned guy on the slate. Maybe CMC could rival him at the high end. Is there an ownership threshold where you start to get a little spooked about playing Puka?
I mean, yeah, there always is, but I don't think he'll reach it. One thing I do like about Puka is that I think in general, running back on this slate, it's easier to get high upside guys that you feel good about than at wide receiver. Like, there's plenty of good wide receiver plays, but it's a lot of teams that have like multiple options and any of them can go off. Whereas at running back, you just have like clear RB1 after clear RB1. So I do think that the opportunity cost to going McCaffrey is a little bit higher than going Puka. I also think McCaffrey projects better. So, there is that. But yeah, like right now seeing, Puka around mid 30s in ownership, I think is perfectly fine.
Do you think there's
I'll
any
add on real quick with the pricing note. The way I see it is actually with the team total or the game total in Jacksonville and the QBs there being relatively cheap, that game just gets a little bit aggressively high in terms of ownership. And the only way to really even stack that is going basically mid-range receiver, particularly Parker Washington, which seems a little bit shaky. Maybe Jacoby Myers. But even Allen becomes pretty stackable at cost because of how cheap he is. So I could see the Puka coming in fairly low, and then like Josh Jacobs in the mid-range is just so affordable, works with everything, that he gets extremely high. And then the secondary owned like running back plays are likely to be sort of equally owned as Puka, in my opinion. So I don't think Puka gets that high.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that certainly makes it more attractive, because I was just going to ask you guys if you think that there's, any risk in, Adams being back. We saw him essentially operate as their goal line back. We have seen them using all kinds of 3 tight end sets. Now they get Higbee back. Do you think the projection is like maybe a little too optimistic on Puka potentially?
Not necessarily, because he's the most efficient wide receiver we've seen in the past decade. And it's to the point where you don't really need that touchdown upside, even, especially on a 6-gamer, where a lot of the time just having a score that doesn't hurt you will be enough. And for him, he's getting a bonus half the time here.
Adam, do you like any other plays specifically on the Rams side here?
Yeah, I actually like the Rams in general a little bit, and outside of Puka, it is all like ownership dependent stuff. This is with the assumption that like none of these guys get a ton. But I do think there's going to be a tendency, like looking at the prop market earlier and stuff. I think Parkinson may be going a little bit just overlooked, and I like Higbee too. But like assuming they continue going with the 3 tight end stuff that they were doing even before Adams got hurt, Parkinson's been like, no matter what split you look at, like who's been in or been out, Parkinson's actually been the alpha receiving tight end in terms of on a per route basis. And then the last couple games before Higbee got hurt, they were running a similar number of routes. Last game, obviously Higbee's first game back, Higbee ran a ton of routes, but Parkinson still ran more. I think it's likely that you see Higbee and Parkinson run a similar number of routes. And there seems to be an assumption that like Higbee's just the guy, which like I like Higbee. I think he's good. But I think Parkinson's still interesting there too. And then also at running back with Kyren, like Devontae Adams being back is clearly bad for Kyren in terms of them using Adams as essentially a goal line back. So it does hurt his touchdown projection. But I think there's also maybe a little bit of a sentiment that like Blake Corum is cutting into Kyren a little bit more than he really is. Like Corum's actually had a pretty stable role, just like living like 35 to 37% of the Rams rushing market share. Stafford's not going to have games where he just like randomly runs. So like everything else goes to Kyren. Like he's going to get a lot of touches. I think probably like 15, 16 carries. Obviously, again, you do run the risk of losing that goal line work. So it is very ownership dependent. But I think that there's a pretty good chance. And like with what Yuta was saying about people gravitating probably towards that Bills Jags game, I think there is a chance potentially to pick off either one of Higbee, Parkinson at lower ownership than they should have. Maybe Kyren comes in a little bit lower than he should because of Jacobs. So even outside of Puka, I think the Rams are actually an interesting team.
And seems like Stafford could be like 6th, 7th lowest owned quarterback on the slate.
Yeah, that's a lot of the driver of the appeal, and he carries that condensed target stuff. Also, I don't really think the Panthers have a real chance of running on the Rams, and they might realize that pretty early on.
So I take it if you are interested in Panthers piece, it's just is it Tetaroya or Coker basically?
You could do a lot, and you probably have to get into like different combinations just because there's 6 games. But yeah, those two would be the first picks for me.
I don't think it's a spot either, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier too. I don't necessarily think it's a spot where like if you're stacking the Rams, you have to have a Panthers run back either, because the Rams offense is so concentrated, and like they're not going to if they do eventually take their foot off the gas, it's still not going to be until they've scored 4 or 5 touchdowns. So I don't think you have to like force in a Panther.
Yeah,
that's sort of why I touched on it could be just an onslaught angle.
Yeah.
On that kind of thought, and obviously each team and their total is unique, but do you have any kind of macro thoughts about correlating or attacking a specific game on this slate versus trying to handpick some one-offs?
I haven't built enough to really know, but probably a combination. It's mostly just going to depend on pricing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was mentioning to Adam before, it does seem the pricing is loose enough that you can get a lot in. But I guess the Rams would probably be, they have the biggest team total on the slate. That would be the one team you feel pretty comfortable having 4 or 5 guys from.
Yeah. The dynamic is still that the game that's the most appealing doesn't have high-end pieces at playmakers. It's at QB, and the playmakers are mid-range or cheap, which also makes the QB sort of easier to fit.
Mm-hmm. Guys, I mentioned this at the top of the show. We're gonna talk about all of the teams individually. The ownership we are going to discuss through the lens of the 6-gamer, but I think you'll be able to apply some of these takes to the individual Saturday and Sunday slates as well. Anything else of note for you guys on Carolina? Would it make a guy like Chuba, if he's going to catch more balls, a little bit more interesting in a negative game script?
Probably, just because he's not the starting option. So if the negative game script is happening, the starting running back is probably not working out. And I sort of think that Chuba is a more effective player anyway. And I don't think neither are very good in the pass game, but I think just Chuba is a more solid runner. It actually should be that Chuba's starting. Just they sort of stuck with a few games where their blocking lined up with having soft matchups that they abandoned Chuba. Like he lost his job because he got hurt, not because Dowdle's better.
Yep.
I think
Adam,
any other for me on either of the Panthers running backs though is just how many good and not expensive running backs there are on the slate.
Right, you would really only go to someone like Hubbard in a really negative script and something really large field, because he's not even really going to work out from a price standpoint.
Yep. Any other thoughts on this game, or is it? Do you guys have any thoughts on Adams on his return? I know, Adam, you gave some of the tight end takes there. I assume you guys like Kyren as well. If he goes, at 5%, Kyren with that team total seems pretty nice.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because you've seen McVay really rely on Kyren in more high leverage games. Not to say that this is like a true high leverage game to them, because it could just be like a glorified regular season game if they expect to have control like that. But we have seen Kyren basically get 90% of snaps in bigger games.
Yep.
I don't think Kyren will actually be 5% owned, but if he is, I kind of think he's probably my highest owned running back.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a little light to me, just knowing how much people gravitate there. And I guess like Corum has been a little bit of an annoyance, but not enough to really pull his ownership down.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. Like he's definitely an annoyance. Like you have the reason Kyren's ownership will be relatively low is because Josh Jacobs is $100 less, and Josh Jacobs is going to get the vast majority of his team's carries most likely. But Corum would be scarier if you had if there was more volatility in how many carries he gets. Like if you had some games where he gets half the carries on the team and other games where he gets 25%. But Corum has been so stable that you haven't really seen that. And then like you was saying, also a playoff game where McVay's tendency is generally going to be to rely on Kyren more anyway.
Yeah. Let's move over to this next game. Green Bay, Chicago. Chicago is +1. Green Bay, 23 implied team total here. Packers or Chicago 21.5. What are you guys thinking with this game?
One thing just right away is that there could be weather, so monitor that. Saw like 15 to 20 mile winds baseline and then maybe gusts higher. The other thing is it opened as like a pick'em, but it trended towards Green Bay, which I think is right. Mostly just because like Green Bay and Jordan Love is a very like low variance offense, right? They rely on the run, and Love is one of the best decision makers when he needs to make decisions in the NFL, whereas Caleb can have these wild outcomes as far as like how he shows up, and he can lose games by himself. He can make like 1% comebacks happen too.
Yeah. And looking at ownership, Adam, it does seem like people are going to prefer to play this through the Packers side. I mean, the Watson and the Jacobs stuff is pretty attractive there. Where do you lean here?
Yeah, it is a spot where I think it's a little bit more ownership dependent for me than like, say, we were talking about Puka and Kyron and stuff, because you do get the volatility not only in production from Green Bay receivers, but also in exactly who's on the field. Like, I think the assumption is that, like, obviously your top three are Watson, Reed, and Dobbs. And I think the assumption is that you're probably getting like 65, 70% route participation from all of them in some sort of split. But there is, some chance, like we saw a random Jaden Reed 85% route participation game a few weeks ago. So there is that. The ownership right now on Watson just seems like it has to change. I don't think he can be 54% owned. But like that would be insane given, his volatility.
It'll be flipped, those figures between Watson and Jacobs.
Yeah, I agreed.
That makes sense.
So I think Jacobs' ownership right now is too low and Watson's is too high. So like at wide receiver, you have that volatility, but they're all cheap. So like it's nice. Jacobs, I think, is just going to be incredibly popular. But I did a show with Davis yesterday, and I was talking about how much Jacobs stood out because I assume he's going to be healthier than he had been closing out the season. I think you're going to see it go back to what we saw earlier in the year where like Emmanuel Wilson gets, a few carries, but it's the Josh Jacobs show. But then I've seen some industry projections that are like really high, good matchup and all that, but like higher than I expected. So I think it's really going to drive a lot of ownership.
It is a little bit scary how poorly he played in the games where he got limited. Like he probably should have just sat those out because he wasn't even helping.
And it's scary too, because like he obviously he's appealing because if you're assuming he's getting the full workload, like he's getting the goal line work, all of that, but he's still not somebody that contributes a ton through the passing game. Like he'll catch a couple passes, but very touchdown dependent, which is fine because like he'll get those carries. But like you do have Romeo Dobbs that we know they'll just, throw those Devontae Adams routes to around the goal line at times. Like he's clearly underpriced, but he doesn't give you the same sort of floor that like he would if he was somebody that you could guarantee was going to catch 5-6 passes. So I do think while he clearly is very good and underpriced here, the ownership, assuming it does end up coming in a lot higher than it's projected right now, will concern me a little bit.
Are there any other plays to really consider here for the Pack? I guess you have Love, you have Jacobs, and then you're cycling through the three wide receivers. That's really it, right?
I think so. I think it's tough to get to a tight end.
Yeah.
No one's going to really play these guys on offense, though, outside of Watson, Loveland. Like the other guys are not going to be used at all.
Yeah. So heading over to the Bears side, obviously got kind of this split between Swift and Monangai. Pretty interesting dynamic with Rome coming back, Loveland coming on, figuring out where Burden fits in because his breakout kind of happened while Rome was out. How do you see that shaking out, Yuta?
That's just like a classic input volatile thing where if everything's on the line in this game, he might even get elevated snap share. It's probably worth dabbling in, and you get a little bit of separation at the ownership on the sixth game. Like the second game of the slate, it allows you to make a real decision from there because he's not going to be too owned.
Yeah. Which is funny, Adam, because I feel like Burden, he's such a meme in the Slappy communities. He was on the winning BBM team, all of this stuff, and yet you look at the ownership and the stuff here, and it doesn't feel like people are going to pile onto him.
Yeah, I was surprised earlier. That was one of the spots that I was kind of like looking at where I'm at versus the industry, and I was actually high. And it was like, man, I'm high on a rookie. That's unusual. But one thing I do like about Burden here, like I agree with you completely about the input volatility in a couple senses. Like one, you've seen Burden play really well, towards the end of the year. So like maybe that earns more work. But then also we don't know how involved Odunze is going to be in his first game back in a while. But we did get this like 4-game stretch from week 10 through week 14. Or really a 3-game stretch from 11 through 14 where Burden clearly moved ahead of Zacchaeus, and Burden was running like 60% route participation. And then you were getting like 85% from Moore and Odunze. So we did already see that happen. That does make me a little bit or quite a bit more confident in Burden's floor in terms of like, I think he's clearly ahead of Zacchaeus. I don't think you're going to get the game where like Zacchaeus is back out there 65% of the time and Burden.
Yeah, it would be crazy if they really played Zacchaeus more than
right. 30%. So like, I think you at least get that. And then the volatility is really just a matter of like, okay, is Burden coming in at 65% route participation, in which case like he's a good play, or does he like jump ahead of DJ Moore, or, does he run more routes than Odunze? The other thing that I really liked is that even in those games that Odunze was in, Burden still maintained like 0.24 targets per route run or something, or 24% targets per route run.
I'll say like even if his routes are like 50%, he's in the game to get targeted.
Right.
So
yeah, they throw it to
him before as far as like the looks he'll get. But talking about the game right now, I'm kind of getting on in my head to more Jordan Love, Caleb Williams because of how fragile Jacobs might be and the basically zero ownership on these playmakers outside of Watson, Loveland. And we're not there yet, but I assume I'm going to be taking like a fade stance on Jacksonville plays. And so naturally you need to like have that quarterback portfolio stuff go somewhere. And so naturally, I think it's just my thought is it's going to sort of like spread to like all the other guys.
What do you think about the Loveland stuff? He, after Kittle, he's now kind of the tight end on this slate that feels the comfiest, but I think you could still argue it's a pretty flat tier of all those tight ends there. Do you think Loveland is good or bad?
He's a great player. I don't know if it's like how chalky will be. I assume he would be like the second tight end owned, I guess, after who would be the chalk here. Actually, no, there's no great. He might be the most owned tight end.
He might. Yeah.
I think he will be.
I'd add with Loveland that there is some input volatility there too. So I'll preface by saying like I think Loveland's a very good play. I like him a lot. It kind of is like the Jacob spot sort of for me though, where like I'm a little concerned about the ownership because he is coming off 3 straight weeks where he ran like 85% route participation, but Odunze was out all 3 of those games. But you also had Zacchaeus miss one of those games. You had Burden miss one of those games. In games where like all the wide receivers have been active and not gotten hurt during the game, you haven't topped 70% route participation yet for Loveland. I think you can top that this week, but I do think that there's a chance that people are looking at Loveland and projecting Loveland a little bit higher or to be on the field a little bit more than he probably will be. So it's a spot where like you're kind of splitting hairs because like even I still think he's one of the best tight end plays, but like if everybody thinks he's like clearly the best tight end play, and I think he's like probably the best tight end play, it's a spot where it is likely, I think, where maybe I just make some pivots to like those Rams tight ends or others.
Yeah, it seems like what Goddard, Kincaid, Kittle, Loveland.
It's a shaky tight end slate, and I think that makes Loveland the highest because people in a normal situation they would want to go to Kincaid here, but we don't know about his status really, and then the best tight end overall is Kittle, who was also hurt and having a bad matchup.
Yeah, and it's also like you look at the quarterback ownership, and if it's Allen and Lawrence, people will tack on Kincaid and Strange. If you're going Hurts, you tack on Goddard. May, you tack on Henry. So you get down there, you'll have those stacks, and then Loveland would be the one guy you'd be comfortable playing, not directly tied to the quarterback, probably.
Yeah.
If you On the Loveland stuff, if you don't, not saying you don't feel comfortable playing him as a one-off, but would you be interested in like Caleb double stacks here?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about that.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of part of a game flow where Jacobs doesn't do well.
Yeah. Any other plays that we haven't hit in this game, Adam, that you think are interesting?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard to get to the Rome in DJ Moore stuff. That's just the way things have been trending.
I would just rather play Burden unless like Burden's ownership goes crazy. Yep.
All right, let's move to our first Sunday game here. This is the Buffalo-Jacksonville game that Yuta was alluding to, 51.5 point total, which is the highest on the slate. Jacksonville is slight home dogs here. Definitely going to be a lot of interest in this game. There's also a lot of, I would say, fanfare around the Jags getting it done here against this Bills team that doesn't have too many weapons outside of Allen or Cook. But what are you seeing here, Yuta?
That it's a tight game and it's like a two-sided affair as far as how it can go. And the way I see it is that Jacksonville's success is going to be an under because first of all, Buffalo is sort of a bend don't break defense. Jacksonville, this in their run, has been really good at grinding out these long drives. They don't really have particularly explosive guys outside, with Brian Thomas taking a bit of a step back this year. And so also you have to factor in, like, from 2023 that Lawrence has like these playoff demons where he's been very, very shaky in these big games. So I think if they're doing well and like they're up by 7 or something, they're going to just play to not lose. And you can definitely run on Buffalo. And that's sort of why I think that there's like a real cap to the Lawrence upside. And overall, I'm not too interested taking him in like these tournaments.
What angles do you like here, Adam?
So I think the wide receiver spot on Jacksonville is just like the classic, well, yeah, but what if I'm wrong thing? Because like week 18, I thought Parker Washington should be projected ahead of Brian Thomas, and like that wasn't industry consensus. I was surprised. And then now the industry's like caught up and flipped, and Brian Thomas is projected as the tier 3, which like he should be. He should be the third projected receiver behind Myers and Washington. But like if you look at the projected ownership right now and you just assume it's, somewhat right, 46% coming into Washington, 8 coming into Brian Thomas. Like if you do want to go to the Jags or you just want like a Jags piece of this game, I think that's an interesting one just because like Brian Thomas will still be on the field. Parker Washington has run more routes than him each of the last couple of weeks. Thomas obviously not having a good year. Parker Washington is, but like they're still going to be touchdown dependent, so there is just that volatility there. So that stands out to me where like, yeah, I do prefer Parker Washington, but that's a massive gap in a spot where there is a lot of volatility. And then also ETN, to Yuta's point about being able to run on Buffalo and Jacksonville, probably being happy to grind out a win if they can, negatively correlating with Trevor Lawrence to some extent. Obviously ETN can catch touchdown passes. We saw 2 or 3 in one game. But like ETN's not projected for much ownership because he's in that Josh Jacobs range where everybody's going to click Josh Jacobs. So like that's a spot that you can take too if, you're just stacking a different game and want to, go low on the running back. Like you can get, hope that you get the game where Jacksonville just grinds out a win and doesn't have to put a lot on Trevor Lawrence's shoulders.
Yeah. What do you think of ETN? I mean, he's going to be higher than 4% ownership, but if he does get squeezed, what do you think of him, Yuta?
I haven't thought much of him. I don't think he'll like get particularly high at all. I was just thinking that the way Jacksonville's been on this run, it's actually been they've kept it extremely simple, and they're almost winning most of these plays pre-snap, right? They're winning right now, like sort of how like the Patriots with like
I believe in the old DFS Edge days, the Jerry bark, that was a bullish signal here for that. But that Yuta, the look that Yuta just gave, I mean, that was right there.
I was gonna try and just like expand on what he was saying, but I have no idea what he was even gonna say. So
yeah, all right, he's back here.
Headphone guys, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You were talking about them winning pre-snap.
Yeah, I feel like they're playing how like the Patriots used to play with like Tom Brady. Basically, it's a crazy comparison. But like working middle of the field, using all the guys, tight ends, and so it's like kind of hard to defend. But it's also in a way where like they're not just exploding down the field.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, I always, can use it as a little bit of a sentiment indicator, but yeah, the Parker Washington steam is like out of control in the playoff best ball streets. Like he's flipped, Myers in a lot of these drafts, and like people are very excited about Parker Washington.
And it's entirely deserved though, because he's played great. It's lined up with like the Lawrence run. It's just come at all the expense of downfield work, but they're getting every third down and averaging like. They're getting over 5 yards every single play. And so I'm not sure Buffalo's a team that's going to stop that. But in the roundabout way, I don't even know if that's good for DFS upside.
Yeah. What about like on the Bills side? Is it as simple as Allen and or Cook and log out, or can you get to some of the pass catchers?
Not necessarily. Like you're going to have to get into something because Josh Allen isn't going to score 30 without carrying someone along, and it's only 6 games, so you're going to want to correlate a little bit. But I think that's sort of the way that the game does become the one you need. It's that if the Bills get up and you have Jacksonville trailing a little bit, that's when the reception upside as like a bring back. The reception volume could be a little elevated, and you already have Josh Allen being the most explosive fantasy quarterback separating.
Do you guys have a preference if you were to stack him? Do you have a favorite wide receiver of the bunch?
Shakir Kincaid.
Kincaid. Probably Kincaid.
Kincaid's the most interesting just because there is that input volatility of like how much is he physically going to be able to play. I did like that he ran like 20% of the routes last week in the Week 18 game. I did like that. It's something that kind of comes from NBA, but like I always like it when like a player coming back from injury gets like garbage time run just to get his minutes up. I always think that's like a good thing going into the next game. So I did at least like that we saw that from Kincaid. They didn't just like get him out there for the minimum necessarily, but also just because like obviously there's volatility at wide receiver, but like tight end is it's a deep position in terms of like guys that can easily have a good game, but it's a very weak position in terms of guys that you're confident they're going to have a good game. So just throwing darts at Kincaid, especially assuming that, he is relatively low owned because of the risk, becomes interesting to me.
If you were interested in playing Bill stuff, would you avoid playing Allen and Cook together and just try to alpha it through one of them, or does that correlation not bother you?
On this slate, you can't do that because it's only 6 games. I would avoid Allen, Cook, Bills, like all 3 of them.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't exclude Allen, Cook.
Bills defense, you mean?
Or just Bills pass catcher tacked onto it? Or what do you mean?
What was that?
Did you mean Bills DFD or Bills?
Like I wouldn't have all 3 of the Allen, Cook, and Bills D yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
But I do think there's a floor to the Kincaid ownership. Like it's not going to get that low.
Yeah.
Being attached to Allen here.
Yeah, I don't think it can't be like that low. Like the 9 right now seems like it probably.
Yeah. I think Shakir gets low, so maybe Shakir is the more appealing part.
Yeah, it's too gross of a tight end slate for people not to just want to correlate their Allen with Kincaid.
25% Brandon Cooks, I don't think can be right, but that's absolutely disgusting if it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. I don't have a good gauge on how people feel about Brandon Cooks, but there is.
I just don't think you need it.
Yeah. All right, let's head to the second Sunday game here. We have the Eagles hosting the Niners. They're 5.5 point home favorites. What is this? The second lowest total on the slate, I guess, tied with the Green Bay one for that, 44.5. I would say one of the more intriguing matchups on this slate. Yuta, how do you see this one playing out?
I like Eagles to do well, and it's mostly on what we've seen out of like Niners defense. You can't really ask much more out of Purdy lately. He's been basically the best quarterback in the league this past month. He was absolutely shredding like the weaker defenses, doing what he needed to do. But then you saw them go up against Seattle, and I don't even think he played a bad game. He just didn't have a prayer with, I guess that game, Trent Williams being out, and then the Seattle pass rush. So it wouldn't really unfold the same way where he has no chance because they probably get Williams back, and the Eagles' defensive front isn't really as scary as Seattle's. But on the opposite side of the ball, the way Seattle ran, the Eagles are going to get Lane Johnson back, and Mailata is peaking. He was struggling early, like the run blocking early was not good. And also Saquon is peaking with him at the same time. So this is probably a better running unit than the Seahawks were in that last game, which was essentially a playoff game. So I think that's a good indicator of how things can go. This is like a better running unit, more talented, probably, especially in the blocking side. It's hard to see the Eagles' run game not doing well.
Yeah. Yeah, Barkley here seeing 38% ownership. That seems like it'll be the comfier way to play it. People don't, I think, like guessing which pass catcher is going to pop up with the big game. What's your favorite angle, Adam?
Yeah, I'm with him on the running. I do think it's interesting right now that the ownership on Barkley is higher than Jacobs. I don't think that holds. But I like Barkley a lot. Like there was so much talk about all season long about, like, oh, Barkley's struggling because like he had so many carries last year. And so we were right. You can't play old guys after that many carries. And it's like, yeah, he's been missing. He's had a banged up / bad offensive line for most of the year. They're finally getting healthy. They're playing well. It's a team that you can run on. So I really like that. But I like the wide receivers too. Like I'm always somebody that is very interested in stacking the Eagles when they're relatively low owned, the pass catchers, just because like you do know where the ball's going. They throw the ball to four guys, including Barkley, 3 guys, not including Barkley. Obviously, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are very, very good. You get the rushing upside with Jalen Hurts as well. So, like, even though guessing which receiver it's going to be is always a nightmare, like the Niners have just gotten shredded in any way imaginable. So, like, I like the passing game too, but I'm with him as far as thinking that like Barkley is just in a much better spot right now than he has been all season long.
Yeah. Yuta, do you have a preference on, like, if you were to go via the Eagles passing game, do you have any favorites?
Maybe like Goddard, just the way Niners defend, but it's hard to evaluate because you can just do whatever you want. Like your first intention, basically, and if it's run, it's kind of just I'd rather just for me it would just be like, can they even stop the run to begin with? And from there, maybe you can go to like the wide receivers.
Yeah,
but
I think
Niners are pretty like friendly towards the middle of the field.
What were you going to say, Adam?
So I think Barkley's the biggest priority, just because like we know that generally Philadelphia wants to run. They should be able to. They're not necessarily going to have to like deviate from their first choice.
Yeah.
Easy asking here. If you could play only one between CMC and Puka, who would be your priority?
Puka for me.
That's Puka.
Yeah. How do you think if the Niners do succeed here, who do you think it's through? Is it just CMC carrying it, or could you see the passing game clicking at all?
It's going to have to be CMC involved somewhat, just because he's such a big percentage of their offense. But for me, that kind of opens up the door more for Eagles pass catcher if the Niners are to do well. That sort of implies that the Eagles aren't up.
Yeah. So it'd be like CMC opposite, like a Hurts stack kind of thing.
Even like Purdy, Kittle, CMC, that would be the most straightforward. It's not like terribly high on. That works. And then something on Eagles side.
Yeah.
I guess I probably wouldn't take both running backs, CMC, Saquon, with a quarterback.
Okay.
Like I think if we take both running backs, the quarterback from this game becomes out of the question, because I don't think there's going to be that many plays getting off.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Would you guys dabble in any Niners pass catcher?
Just Kittle for sure with the with the volatility there and his health. If he was guaranteed healthy, he would probably be the highest here.
Yeah, I guess I meant wide receiver is what I meant to say.
Oh,
sorry.
It's harder to get there with the rotation and total and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I mean, it's assuming like if we assume Pearsall's not playing, I don't know if that's been confirmed or not yet. But like Jennings and Bourne, I guess would be the ones you look to first. But like I don't think I really get to much of either. There's just so many other guys that I like more.
Yeah, looks like Pearsall didn't practice yesterday. We'll see what happens today. Let's head to this Sunday night game. Chargers at New England. New England 3.5 point favorites. This was definitely a spread. When I saw that, I was surprised it wasn't bigger on first blush. What do you think about this spot, Yuta?
Oh, well, full disclosure, I already bet the Chargers with that same line. So
nice.
I think that, well, everyone knows they haven't really played real opponents, especially defensively, but it's not like Chargers are going to introduce, it's not like they're going to change that. I just think the way that New England plays defense, it lines up pretty well with how the Chargers play offense, in that they don't really have an offensive line, but the Pats aren't going to rush you like that. And so I think they're going to be able to succeed in moving the ball, and then it just comes down to red zone efficiency.
We mentioned before the Omari Hampton should be back at practice. That would have been an interesting wrinkle if we had a starting Kamani Vidal at 4,700. But Adam, as far as the Chargers, obviously Hampton, and then sorting through the pass catchers, do you have any favorites?
I think it's tough to really like a lot from the Chargers, and it's something that's probably going to keep me from getting too much Herbert too, even though I would I like the idea of getting to the Chargers, but it's just like they spread everything out so much. You know, McConkey hasn't had a dominant year. There's plenty of wide receivers I like. I think Gadsden might be my favorite, just like individual piece, because again, like just to me, when in doubt, attack the tight end ownership, because there's going to just be so much volatility there. Gadsden's still running a lot of routes. You know, obviously we saw the monster games earlier in the year, and he's been less consistent since then, but that's just kind of how things go in that offense. You still have a very cheap, low-owned tight end that's going to be on the field a bunch with a good quarterback. So it's hard for me to really single out much from the Chargers, even though I like the Chargers collectively. So just attacking that tight end ownership, again, would probably be my preference.
What's your favorite spot, Yuta? If you like the Chargers putting up points here, who's your favorite?
Yeah, it's really difficult to work with that pricing, but I like them more than the market enough that I would probably take shots at like all the wide receivers, and even getting to like a 8 to 10%, you're going to be over the field. But that's just my stance on it, including Gadsden.
And in those scenarios, would you be including Hampton in those stacks, or trying to play it through the passing game specifically?
It's hard to say. I think we would want to get more clarity on the reports, but even he is hard to get to with combination of the price as well as the health concern. So I'm less likely to get into running backs than receivers.
Yep. And then on the Patriots side, Henderson missed practice today. They said it was a personal reason, no injury designation specifically, so he should be fine. You know, Ramondre has been playing out of his mind of late. I guess Kayshon Boutte popped up with a hamstring injury here as well. We kind of talked about Henry before, but what would be your lean on playing the Patriots if you did?
I mean, overall, I just feel similarly about this game to Jacksonville Buffalo. It's just that they're not owned, and Herbert has like some equity to be the quarterback you need. I mean, I guess you could say the same for May. I just like slightly favor the Chargers side overall, so that's biasing things a little bit. I don't really think that either side is going to be very explosive. It's going to be like red zone efficiency stuff, and unless like someone gets very efficient, that's the only way I see the game pacing up aggressively. But at ownership, I think the pieces make it pretty appealing. So like I'm kind of like slightly above him. How I plan to do it for like every angle of this game.
Adam, do you have if you're choosing your fighter between Henderson and Ramondre, very similar price, you got a favorite there?
I like Henderson a little bit more. One good thing about Ramondre is that he's been very involved in terms of running routes the last few weeks. So there is probably a tendency for people to think he's been more involved overall than he has been because of him having huge plays on the ground. But like, I do like that Henderson has maintained the lead in terms of workload, because we know how explosive Henderson is. But he is right now at least projected for a good amount of ownership. Like, if Henderson's gonna actually get 2x roughly the ownership of Kyron, I would rather have Kyron at the same price. If same for ETN really. So between those two, I would prefer Henderson. Then the other thing I would add is that, like, amongst the pass catchers, I don't think Stephon Diggs is like a huge priority, except for the ownership right now is non-existent, which if he's actually just not going to be owned, I would like him. But I assume that he actually gets to 10%.
Looking at like the receivers versus defense stuff here, I'd probably have to like watch some tape or like look into the defensive concepts, at least for the Chargers, because they're playing a lot of zone, but they don't give up catches to running backs. So they're doing something within the zone to like not really allow something that generally zone gives up. And like they're even like kind of friendly towards wide receiver one, which also would go against that idea. So I'm not really sure. They do tend to be yielding to tight end.
Yeah, it definitely seems like not a single play in this game that is going to carry much ownership at all from what I'm looking at.
Right. It's not as though I feel great about it, though.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, even just like looking at the totals in these games, I mean, it's higher than San Francisco, Philly, Green Bay, Chicago, all these other spots going to catch way more ownership. I guess, is it going back to that idea that you were saying for Buffalo Jags, where just so much of the production could be tied to the quarterbacks and it's not easy to find it elsewhere?
Yeah, that to me, that seems like the only angle after talking about it where like I dislike sort of like Jacksonville stacks enough that I end up being over on everything else.
Yeah.
The way I'm kind of thinking about it from like a stacking standpoint is like, the reason it's not going to be very popular is so many teams on this slate have very concentrated offenses, and then you get these two teams that are relatively spread out. So from a projection standpoint, it won't look that good. But in a one-game sample, like, you can just have the Lad McConkey plus Diggs game, or whatever it is. So like, it makes sense for the ownership to be low, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like not a game that can shoot out in a favorable way.
Yeah. Let's hit this last game. Lowest total on the slate. Houston at Pittsburgh, 38.5. Pittsburgh 3-point home dogs. Obviously not going to be the matchup people want to pile into, but is there anything to like here, Yuta?
I've not really looked into this one at all. It's kind of just like a last shot Wade swap, I think, is how it would play out in the 6th game. Maybe some people get to DK Metcalf, Dalton Schultz, but you're not taking quarterbacks here. You're not really getting into running backs unless you are desperate.
Yeah, what do you think, Adam?
Completely opposite side of Yuta, so I'm probably wrong. So I don't want to be here, but there are a couple things that I like. One, Pittsburgh defensively has allowed the most plays per game this year. Houston's offense is around the 4th most plays per game. I think there's a chance that you just get more plays run than people are expecting. But also, like, Stroud's really cheap. I don't think you necessarily need it. But Nico's also going to be really, really tough to get into lineups because he's at like a weird pricing tier at wide receiver where people are obviously going to want to go to Puka for more than him, and then they're going to just like be living in the mid-range. So it's not that I like Stroud, but the lack of ownership to Nico, I think, will pull him up a little bit. I think Dalton Schultz at tight end, like, I'm more than happy to go there at, I think it's 4K. But then on the other side with Gainwell also, I mentioned it yesterday too, but like the most consistent spot probably throughout the year where when I like compare how I'm projecting stuff to the market, where like I'm just always off market, is receiving work for Pittsburgh running backs, because it's not just that both Gainwell and Warren run a decent number of routes, and obviously Gainwell's running more, but Aaron Rodgers targets them both, but especially Gainwell at such a ridiculously high rate. One, by design, and then two, because Rodgers isn't somebody that when he's under pressure is getting out and running. I just like how much receiving work Kenneth Gainwell gets. I don't remember the specific numbers or stats anymore, but Davis pulled it up yesterday. And the guys around Gainwell in terms of like targets per route run at wide receiver, it's like Christian McCaffrey 1, Gainwell 2, something like that. It's just like it was like 4 studs and Kenneth Gainwell. So I do have some interest here, even though overall I think it's like a really gross game.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think I mean, the Gainwell floor has been awesome. Do you worry at all about the ceiling? Or I guess he's had some of those big reception, screen game plays.
The matchup sucks, but like also it is only a 6-game slate. And the biggest issue with Gainwell is that Kyron and Jacobs in particular, also ETN, are underpriced and like right there with him. So he, obviously you can pair him with those guys too, but like you need him to put up a score that like beats the majority of those guys at least. Like that's the biggest issue. I would love Gainwell if like all those guys were 7,500 and you actually had a real price difference between them. So to me, that's the biggest issue. But like they use Gainwell around the goal line, they throw him a ton of passes. So like I think he has a ceiling. It's just the matchup obviously makes it less likely that he gets to it.
Yep. Yuta, I know you said you hadn't looked at this spot much. Are there any other players or things you do anticipate looking into here?
Well, Houston, you sort of know what they're going to do. They're going to rush 4. They're going to cover well. And so that could open up some angles to like tight end and receiving running back doing well just as the outlet there. So I could see that. And a less likely scenario that I could see also playing out is that Steelers pass rush, especially last game, was amazing. Like JJ Watt coming back from that injury might be one of the tougher things I've seen in a while in the NFL. Played a great game. Like Hayward too. Like they were playing pretty possessed, and that is kind of into the weakness of the Texans, where they don't really block well, and Stroud isn't that mobile. So I could see Steelers defense doing well, and if they happen to be able to block the pass rush, it kind of could even play out where Collins can break out something big because they're playing a lot of man coverage on the back end, which is scary when you're up against Nico Collins, but also they have the pass rush as a pretty reliable prevention of like that outcome.
Do you guys have any takes on the Woody Mark stuff? Obviously hasn't looked good just as a runner, and yet he's going to face basically no competition for targets here. I think we got to get Jawar Jordan out of the mix here as well, because I believe he's injured, right? So curious kind of how you guys feel about 5,600 Woody Marks having that backfield to himself.
Well, he's going to have to block. So
yeah,
it's going to be tough. I don't even know if they have a reliable blocker at running back. Maybe it is Marks, but I have to look at it.
Yeah.
He's pretty good at that aspect. So I think
that was kind of his thing coming into the year that was going to get him on the field, and then he just kind of ran with it.
Yeah. He just like is kind of the classic, starting running back you're not super excited about, and yet favorites in a game where he should see 15 plus touches kind of puts him on the conversation a little bit.
Yeah. I think the best thing going for him is I've been on him like every week and it's not worked out, and I'm sure I won't happen this week. There you
go. All right, let's I'll run some sims here and we can just kind of look at a couple lineups, but any other, now that we've kind of talked through individual team spots, any other kind of macro thoughts? I know we've gotten them sprinkled throughout, but to put a bow on some of that stuff, things you guys like overall here?
A couple things that I had noticed that I forgot to mention because they're not like super actionable for the slate. But Bryce Young is running a lot more. His rushing market share the last 5 to 6 weeks, each individual week has been higher than his previous season high outside of week 1 up to that point. So like you are seeing more rushing from him. You're seeing less from Caleb Williams similarly. But again, neither of those things are like, it's not enough to move Bryce Young into like, oh, I want to play Bryce Young on this slate, or, to not want to play Caleb Williams necessarily.
So when we run these, Yuta, it's a ton of CJ Stroud here. Lots of Dalton Schultz, lots of doubles with either Higgins or Nico as part of that. Definitely seeing Adams, Kenny Gainwell take pop up here in a good amount. A lot of Kyron I'm noticing. Anything else stand out to you here?
I mean, I think we saw a few wonky numbers, probably just because the slate is starting a day earlier, so we're gonna have to brush up, but it's gonna trickle through into the sims. So probably take the grain of salt there. Yeah, that's really all I have.
The CJ Stroud projection that you probably had is like the projection on CJ Stroud is probably still a little bit too high, but the one that you used is probably like way too high.
Okay. Gotcha. Here, yeah. And like, yeah, I'm trying to see here if we look at some of the love stuff. Definitely he shows up here a bit with Christian Watson, some Jaden Reed in here. Would you double Love if you were kind of trying to fade that Jacobs angle, or would you just want to do a skinny with one of the receivers, do you think?
You don't really have to double him necessarily. You can even take him with Jacobs. It just sort of depends on the rest of the lineup.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see if there's any Caleb showing up as well. Top Caleb lineup is a skinny there with Luther Burden. Does seem like we're getting a ton of 3 running back lineups. Do you guys think that's kind of the dominant strategy for this slate?
Yeah,
I think it's my preference.
Yeah. A lot of these, Kyron is kind of a fixture in a lot of these, which makes sense with the projection and that really low ownership. So these would probably a little less Kyron will populate if that ownership comes up. Would you guys imagine that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other kind of final thoughts here for people as they get ready to build their lineups for this slate?
That I think there's going to be more angles next week.
Okay. How so? Tease that out.
Oh no, just that the particular matchups and the pricing, it kind of leads me to only be able to do a few things, which is okay. But I think it might be more strategy, more things to think about next week.
Yep. What about the with the cap being kind of loose here? Are you guys on team maybe leave some salary on the table to get unique, or are there just other ways to do it where you don't really have to think about it that much?
I don't really think you need to do that because there's still low owned plays that are gonna have real projections, and you could use your whole salary.
Yeah, it's still a 6-game slate.
Yeah,
there's good plays everywhere.
Yeah, looking at even the salary used in these top simmed lineups, I guess there's one that has 1,100 available, but every other one it's somewhere between 0 to 500 at most left on the table there. Yeah, I'll be in touch with you guys next week. I'm traveling Friday, so we could maybe think about doing a divisional round show, but I'll touch base with you guys and we can see if it works out. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll do maybe a couple showdown shows later in the year. If you guys are up for that, we can figure that out as well. I have it pinned in the chat, but as always, you guys can get 50% off your first payment on any of the Run the Sim subs. I mentioned it with Brian yesterday on Lowell's, but you guys are rolling out PGA and what do you got going? NBA right now as well, right?
Yeah, NBA. It's up now. It's free. It won't be free for too much longer. Probably starting next week or something.
There you go. Go check it out while it's still free there. Yuta, any final words for you?
No, that's it.
Perfect. Well, appreciate your guys' time. Good luck in the DraftKings streets this weekend. I'm going to hop over as usual and do an underdog slate breakdown with John and Nez for the Badge Bros. Otherwise, if I don't see you guys, enjoy the games this weekend and good luck.